Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pod TV's number one investment show, Wall Street Hackers with Peter Bennett. My name is Kimberly Calhoun. I'm one of the founders. Nick Palaveda, who usually moderates the show, is in Spain, where he's trying to get settled in there. He's moved. But one of the things I like about Wall Street Hackers is Peter has years of education and experience with investments. Peter has received his BA of Economics at UCLA, his law degree from the University of Miami Law School, and his MBA in finance from NYU, where he then worked on Wall Street and in finance for 17 years. And with this kind of experience, you just can't buy it. And it's wonderful that he shares with us how we can invest a little bit safer during these tough economic times and through these hard storms. So, everyone, I'd like to introduce to you our investment advisor and wonderful person, Peter Bennett.
Well, thanks, Kim. I like that mention of safety, by the way, because it's always risk versus reward, and I try to avoid the risk as much as I
Right.
can.
I
Never
want you.
guarantee, obviously, but we try to get the big rewards without the big risks. Anyway, welcome to Wall Street Hackers, October 31st, 2024. Certainly an exciting week and exciting weeks coming up. You can catch a new episode of Wall Street Hackers almost every week, starting on Thursdays at 1 or Saturdays, depending on your distribution channel. However, we will be off next week, even though it's election week. I had a prior business commitment for the filming days. So we'll be back, though, November 14th, and it should be interesting, or, the following days, depending on your distribution channel. So in the markets, relating to the election, we can't skip that. Many analysts say that whichever party holds the White House really doesn't make a difference. And historically, that is true, especially if there's a split between Congress and the president. But in this case, I really do disagree. And that's my forecast. If we get a socialist and extreme progressive in the White House, it will affect the economy, especially if there's not a split. Although I think there's at least going to be a split, but who knows what will happen. But it's not going to be pretty at all. And that's my forecast. And we've been pretty 100% accurate so far for years on our forecast. I could go through the litany of forecasts we've been right about, but we will see. So back to pure economics in the longer term. Before getting into some recent negative reports on the long-term economy, I want to start with a positive, which is our what to do section in our philosophy. So number one, whatever the macroeconomic picture, not just counting elections, just we have concerns about a lot of things going on in America with debt and other issues. Wall Street hackers might adjust to more defensive allocations at times, but in the end, we almost always stay fully invested, whether it's in stocks or bonds. And that's because our philosophy is to generate income. We like income for a lot of reasons. One, we can spend it, but two, we can reinvest it. So if there's any adjustments in the market or adjustments in the economy, we can redirect funds. And also we can use income to reinvest in generating more income. And of course, we stay with our main philosophy, which is that, and this is based on hundreds of years of studies, which we brought up. I've been putting off going back into them, but maybe after the election, we'll have more time, to focus on that. But we have hundreds of years of studies that show that dividend growers and dividend payers outperform the market substantially. I mean, we're talking about 2 or 3 times in general, especially over dividend non-payers. We also see that REITs often outperform the stock market, and energy has been the place to be in most periods of time. And also MLPs can be exceptional investments. So we just will stay with our philosophy no matter what happens, and maybe make some adjustments, as time goes on. Now, unfortunately, for a few negative things, now I'm not talking about totally negative, and I'll get into that, but some negative quotes of the week, and they are relevant. Number one, from Mott Capital Management, quote, the S&P 500 is historically expensive with high PE and price to sale ratios, suggesting lower future returns for index fund investors and everybody, almost. Current PE and price to sales ratios exceed those of the dot-com and COVID bubbles when adjusted for growth rates. That was an interesting point. He's not talking about totally, but adjusted for growth rates, he's more than the dot-com bubble. That could be a concern. Dividend yields are near historic lows, which is true because I struggle finding the really right investments now more than ever, indicating the market's overvaluation compared to historic norms and the 10-year Treasury yield. Stock selection is crucial as high valuations imply lower future returns, especially for buy and hold investors and index fund participants. Quote number 2 from Barron's, and this is based on their recent big money manager poll. These are the people who manage the really big money. Quote, the optimists expect the Dow Industrials, S&P 500, and tech-heavy NASDAQ all to rise by about 7 to 8% through the end of 2025. The bears look for the Dow to fall 9% through the end of 25 and the S&P to give up 14%. That is quite a bearish forecast. 39% of money managers consider the stock market undervalued, while 43% say the stocks are overvalued. So this kind of aligns with Wall Street Hackers' recent forecast and long-term forecast, and also what Morgan Stanley said recently, that in the next decade, we're likely to get positive returns, at least nominally, but probably positive returns, hopefully against inflation, but much slower growth than it has been. It's going to be a tough decade in terms of future sledding. Third quote of the week from a new Bank of America Institute study. Quote, a new Bank of America Institute study found more Americans are living paycheck to paycheck in 24 compared to 2019. Nearly half of Americans currently feel they are living paycheck to paycheck, and that number has been rising for at least the past 2 years. Now, consumer spending is about 70% of economic activity, and according to Experian recent survey, consumer debt balances increased at 4.4% in 23 from 2022. So that's a substantial increase in debt. Overall, growing consumer debt plus almost unfathomable government debt, both in the U.S. and worldwide. The U.S. is 125 trillion. Almost everybody keeps saying 35 trillion. Please at least say 35 trillion plus. You have to count those other, 190 trillion that's unfunded for liability, Social Security and Medicare unfunded liabilities. They might matter, one way or another down the road. I think I'm joking. They will matter, and they're going to matter each year because the government has been spending that money. The U.S. government has been spending that money that was supposed to be allocated for it, and now it's not going to be available, and it's available less and less. So these are not formulas for a very successful macroeconomic picture for sure, because there are headwinds, to say the least, but that doesn't say you shouldn't be invested. Moving on, and we're moving nicely this week so far, time-wise. We have 2 most interesting stories of the week. So last week, actually, Kim and we had a panel discussion on education, and I focused particularly on Florida success with a program that gives every student $10,000 for either charter schools, private schools, or tutoring. It could be used for any of the above. Florida had tremendous success with this, and in a short amount of time, they rose from one of the lowest states in educational achievement to the 3rd highest state in the country. And even their public school performance greatly improved during these years. And these are measured by everything, college admissions, all kind of different measures. But here's a chart, and this different numbers, but I saw this chart in a similar article that did mention Florida too. And I'll give you the bottom line on this. This is about the growth in administrative staff, principals, teachers, and students in U.S. public schools. Pretty amazing. So administrative staff in public schools from the year 2000 to school year 2022 grew 95%. The number of teachers during that same 22-year period grew 5%. That seems to be a big emphasis on administration. Now, you could argue maybe they need the administrators, but the thing is, student-to-teacher ratio is critically important, or arguably one of the strongest indicators of success in school. In other words, you want a lot of teachers per student. That's obvious. But so that study says maybe the public schools need that competition. The only way that happens, which is what I said last week, is if there's a Republican sweep of all three branches, or both branches, Congress and the presidency, or maybe if Trump gets in, and maybe if there's a Republican and Democrat split in Congress, but it's close, because some Democrats may, even though they've historically been big supporters of unions and public schools, some of them may see the value in this. I mean, it seems to me so clear somebody else should be trying the Florida experiment. It seems amazing. And I think we need competition in the education system, and we certainly need change. We haven't been doing well, as discussed last week, on an international basis, even with some of the highest budgets, for sure. Most interesting story, the week number 2, surprising study in a way. So New Jersey was once the home of a very fiery volcano about the size of Mount St. Helens, and it sits in the same county as a newly mapped fault line. 430 million years ago, the Beamerville volcano spanned 10 to 20 miles across and spewed lava and ash for millions of years. Now, it is considered extinct, but New Jersey residents were shaken by a report just last week that announced a previously unmapped fault line actually runs through the county. That fault line is what caused the magnitude 4.8 earthquake on April 5th that rocked New York City area. It wasn't very significant by LA standards or California standards, but it was still 4.8, and it did do damage to 150 city buildings. This is certainly a surprise to those who live in New York and New Jersey and thought we were on 100% solid rock. Anyway, moving on to our income picks of the week. We have 2 picks this week, which is unheard of, really, for Wall Street Hackers. Usually we bring in a new pick each week, but because I'm doing 2 repeat picks, I decided I'm going to go back to 2 picks that I still like a lot. Number 1, disclaimer, Wall Street Hackers is for entertainment only. These are only our opinions. There's no guarantees on any suggestions, because there's never any guarantees on any suggestions, really. Anybody who says there's a guarantee is misleading you. Consult your financial advisor. So first of the 2 is MPLX, our large allocation at slightly over 10%. This was worth mentioning because they just announced this week a 12.5% dividend increase. And that, to me, is perfect. A large dividend with increases, and there's a lot I like about it. So MPLX has been a long-term investment suggestion for us, as many of our followers probably know. And it's a midstream infrastructure, MLP, that focuses on energy, pipeline storage, and gathering. As an MLP, it has significant tax advantages for some Americans, but you have to be extremely careful in terms of putting it inside an IRA or a 401k if you're holding a lot, because there's something called UBTI, which you can look up, but it's a big penalty if it's held inside an IRA or 401k or other qualified plan. So what I like about MPLX is the now 8.5% dividend, and I think that's the new adjusted one. I have to double check that, but it's at least that. I think that's it. A price to cash flow of 7.6. So that is a 13.2% cash flow yield. And the footnote on that is when I see a company like in their industry where they have a high cash flow, that is including the adjustments for their growth investments. So they're taking a lot of cash, putting it into growth investments and other projects, and yet still they have a very high cash flow yield. It has a very nice dividend growth history. It was 36 cents in 2014, and it's almost 96 cents today. So that's a 267% increase over just 10 years. I hope it does the same in the next 10. Even half of that would be, phenomenal. We'll see. The other thing I like about it a lot is it's much more oily than many other pipeline companies. A lot of the pipeline companies are either natural gas liquids focused or gas itself focused, whether gathering or processing, but MPLX leans towards more oil. I have a lot of concerns about especially natural gas liquids, because Europe has been in decline in terms of their demand for natural gas liquids, and there's forecasts of much more decline from European NGLs. They just won't be importing as much, maybe because their own development and other reasons, and also oncoming solar and other, power sources. So the thing is, a lot of the pipelines themselves ship natural gas liquids through Texas, and MPLX has some of that too, but not as substantial a part of their business. But if that all gets, to the Gulf, and all of a sudden it's like, well, Europe doesn't want it anymore. Well, the Panama Canal is having drought issues, and they can't even ship enough ships through there to Asia. So that means a long route to Asia. So I have concerns about them. And the bottom line, MPLX looks like one of the better companies and stocks, and one of the few I really loved at the time. The second idea is long-term, high coupon treasuries. We make especially important focus to say we like high coupons because we don't know the scenarios on inflation. So right now, their 10s, 20s are yielding somewhere around 4.5% as of yesterday, probably around the same. And that's also tax-free from the states. In other words, state tax-free to U.S. investors, and probably all investors, because states can't tax treasuries, I doubt anyway, because of the constitutional limits. So with guaranteed payments and guarantees on principal at maturity, of course, you have fluctuations during the time if you sell it early, but if you hold it, it's guaranteed maturity. They can be a ballast for a portfolio. Now, the obvious thing is that it's very personal what you allocate to bonds. Everybody has different tastes for risk, different ages, different goals. So I cannot tell you what to put there. Maybe if in an individual discussion with your financial consultant, you can try to resolve it or figure it out yourself. But the thing is, what I like the diversification. I like the guarantees for part of my portfolio. I like the tax-free treatment, and especially if they're put in a Roth IRA, where now you're getting 4.5%, and it's never taxed, which is a pretty good return. You can't get that anywhere near that in a muni now. Even the safest munis maybe yield 3.2, and also even the tax deferral inside an IRA. Some analysts argue, and this is totally everybody's opinion, a 60-40 split of 60 equity, 40 bonds has performed almost as well as a pure equity split. So that's an interesting argument why somebody might want to have bonds. And also others argue, and this is more conservative, but they say for safety, or a lot of safety, or maybe they're right, a good formula is 100 minus your age. But others argue, well, that's too conservative because you're 890 and you only have 10% in equity. Depends on your goals, age, and that's the point. And it's totally personal. So, but I still like them, and I like them as part of a diversified portfolio. So those are our opinions. And the bottom line there is, before we move on to our panel discussion of the week, is that my forecast is probably, with all this debt, governments, one of two things is going to happen. Either the more likely scenario is the governments of the world, because it's not just the U.S., even though I focus on that because we have the 125 trillion number, but the other world governments have promised free healthcare to aging populations, and they put very little aside and have underfunded retirement plans. So the bottom line there is the world's going to be monetizing debt, meaning they want inflation because it's the only way they can manage that. They can't possibly print enough money. It's more money than exists, pretty much. So, and I mean that by saying more money the U.S. owns alone than the U.S. stock market, bond market, and private real estate. And other countries the same. This is like, you can't have that much debt. So they're going to use yield curve control to control it. If they're successful, which is likely, they're going to try to bring rates down to zero or very low, negative, maybe 1%, because they can't afford to pay interest on all the money they're going to be printing. So most likely they'll succeed. We're talking about low interest rates. The other way is massive inflation. Zimbabwe, we're out of control. I have 1% gold, and at least I have the coupons to reinvest, and other cash flows to reinvest at what could be much higher rates, but I don't think so. So that's our forecast. So we actually have a little time here.
I got my crystal ball for my forecast.
There you go. I wish you would.
Want to hear what it is? My
that.
forecast of the week says, watch Peter Bennett on Wall Street Hackers for tips.
There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that. I wish it would work 100%. Then I could just run the show off of that.
That's to me, a lot of this it's a lot of skill to be able to go and handpick, but you're still depending on a lot of elements that your skills don't control. And I don't think people understand
especially in a changing world. And we are living, forget about politics, we are in a changing world it's accelerated, just like chips accelerated, the growth in chips. AI is coming, demographics, there's so much change. But you know what? The investor has to make decisions, whether it's through us or through their consultant or whatever. So we go with that, but we better get into the panel discussion.
One of the biggest things that concerns me, and I brought this up to David Walker, is, China buying up all the bonds that they're buying up, the security bonds. And what if they dump them all? What happens to our market then?
You know what? That could be next week's, 2 weeks from now show. I may just do that. That's a great topic.
Something to research, because that's been my concern. Is I watch all the time conversations on that scale. Right. And that bothers me about the economy. I mean, that could really, to me, hurt the economy very badly.
It could definitely affect things. It's interesting they're buying them, because that maybe they agree with me that maybe bonds are a good thing to have, because that maybe they're saying, you know what, we'll buy the bonds too. Who knows if I'm right? Who knows if China's right? But that is a great discussion. Let's get into the panel question, because I know we're going to be having a discussion on that. So first, I'm going to give the question of the week. I'm going to give a background, not too long, but a bit, and then we'll divide the time up about evenly, because we're always tight on time. So the panel question is, how can Kamala Harris and others call Trump Hitler, a fascist, a dictator, and Stalin, and insult supporters, but criticize Trump for being divisive? Background. Harris's closing argument is clearly Trump, or a good part of it is Trump is Hitler, a dictator, and also is going to use the U.S. military to rule and will pursue his enemies. This seems a bit bizarre and a little childish, but especially since Trump was actually president for 4 years, and he didn't go after Hillary Clinton. Now, he could have easily gone after Hillary Clinton, because she destroyed her laptop. She erased files. She erased 30,000 emails, and she destroyed many phones. Now, she was covering up potentially, let's say, illegal breaches of national security. But either way, if he was vindictive, he certainly would have gone after her, because that would have been an easy call. Next point is, he did, when he was in office for 4 years, accept his legal limits, even though he went through a Russian spy hoax, and I say it was a total hoax. He wasn't a Russian spy. And he went through an impeachment simply for asking the question why Biden family received over $5 million. And Biden went on TV and said, I just got the Ukrainian prosecutor who was going after the company who paid us $5 million fired. He fired the prosecutor. He bragged about it on TV as if it was, I don't know why he even had the boldness to say this. Next point. There were not many Israeli flags, I'm joking, nor Muslims for Trump rallies or Muslims for Hitler signs at Hitler rallies. There were not Israeli signs there, but recently at Madison Square Garden there were. Hillary Clinton herself said the Garden rally was like a Hitler rally, but apparently she forgot that she did a rally in Madison Square Garden with Bill Clinton when she was the New York senator. We're almost finished here. Hillary, of course, called supporters deplorables. That's well known for years. And Biden just called Trump supporters, quote, garbage. Now, the White House and the in the tank media are trying to cover this up. They're saying, oh, he didn't mean it. He only was going after the one comedian who had no connection to Trump, by the way, but he was brought on. Somebody incompetently brought him on at the rally. Admittedly, it was, but Trump doesn't even know who he is. But the point was, Biden said the supporters, plural, are garbage. And if you listen to his meaning, I heard him say it. I always listen to both sides, and I want to see, original news. I try to not get the interpretations. It was pretty clear. He wasn't saying the supporter was, he said the supporters are garbage. It was plural. Okay. And so Tim Walz, the vice president candidate, recently called J.D. Vance a dip. We can't say it. 4 blanks. You figure it out. He called J.D. Vance a dip blank at his very recent rally. Finally, point there before we put it on Kim. So when Kamala was doing her first tough interview with Bret Baier, this is after months of being the nominee, she not only avoided a lot of the questions, saying, I was raised middle class. That wasn't an answer to the substance. But she mentioned Trump 23 times in 27 minutes as answers to the questions on policy and things like that. Now, her main message was, you ready for this? We need to get away from the 10 years of Trump's divisiveness. So, Kim, we have about a minute and a half, too fast, not too fast. Let me ask you.
Okay, so I want to answer your question based
go
on
ahead.
history and comparison. When you talk about Trump and Hitler, and a lot of people, they hear things and compare them to things. But when you sit there and you show me a political party that bans people's rights, Trump bans women's rights for their choice of body, but then he turns around and says that he's for IVF, which also aborts millions of babies and tortures and kills them and keeps them in frozen embryos. They don't care about the babies after they're born or what happens to them, if the abortion works. But then you take and ban books, and then you ban other things. But then it's his phrases. It's his phrases that really are scary. And it's called where he goes around inciting fear and hate with words like evil within, the enemy within. And this catchphrase was actually started by Hitler when he was trying to incite fear in his group of people to kill the Jews. And he also, Trump is well known to name people, give them bad names. Y'all think it's funny, but he calls them horrible names. Well, Hitler used to keep a list of, name calling names to people to help dehumanize them.
Right, Kim,
so that his followers would,
Kim,
do this.
Kim,
I have one more thing. I mean, you want to know why these are answers.
I'm going to answer. I'm going to agree with some of the things you said. Wait, let me go, Kim. Let me get Kim. You have to let me go.
This is Hitler behavior. It is very much Hitler behavior.
I understand. We never have enough time. First of all, I agree with you on abortion.
But you have 2 minutes.
Let me talk. I agree with you on abortion, first of all. But because somebody believes in abortion or not, or wants limits on abortion or not, or whatever, that's not Hitler, I would say. That has nothing to do with Hitler. 2, because somebody, I don't know what you meant by banning books. Maybe we'll discuss that next week. I don't believe Trump believes in banning books. If somebody says, we'll just debate that next week, maybe. 3, because he says evil within, you could say just using 2 words doesn't mean he's Hitler. Yes, coincidentally, maybe 2 people used it, but you're right. On the other side, he is not a great communicator. He does insult people at times. But the thing is, the nation's policies and the nation's future is now dependent on this election, which could go either way. So I don't even have really time.
I want one more thing.
You got to let me go.
I know, but one more thing. J.D. Vance called him Hitler as well. And Hitler was well known for convincing people to his opposers, his strongest opponents,
you have to be quiet, please.
To become his leaders.
You can't do this. I have to finish. We only have 30 minutes. I think
that's weird. That's all. It's just weird.
Yes, J.D. Vance took it back, and he was sorry, and he should never have used that word. But 2 wrongs don't make a right.
He did.
Kim, do not let me talk. 2 words do not make a right. It's really, you're not having the show by you not letting me talk, for sure. Okay, so now we're going to go over, but we'll see how it's edited. Anyway, so my fast conclusions, because now I'm really short on time because you took it all 4 minutes. One, there's a real lack of integrity and total illogical in making that your closing argument about divisiveness and saying the most divisive terms I could imagine. It's so insulting. And it's insulting to the American public in their intelligence, too. Bottom line, we're going to see next week or in 2 weeks or whatever what happens. I blame the media for this because I think Kim probably is like a lot of my friends. I have engineers and I have attorney friends who are moderate and who are liberal. And there's a total split in the country because half of my people I know totally believe that they're getting reliable information from MSNBC, CNN, ABC, Axios. They say things like that. They say, oh, they're neutral, they're reliable. But the other half of the country thinks they're totally fake. I'm in the totally fake camp because I compare all the time what they do. I think they edit things left and right to change the total meaning.
Fox does too. Fox edits things too.
Well, I'm not arguing with you. I
got it.
No, we're going to have to discuss this. I have to have my time too. You took 4 minutes. Anyway, so, and yes, Fox edits a little bit, but I've never seen them actually edit words to totally reverse the meaning. I see it all day long, totally out of context things. Anyway, people are either going to believe me or not. You don't believe me. You're in that half that believes that you're getting reliable news. I'm in the half, and many, or well, from the other mainstream media.
I research from other resources.
Well, that's good. Anyway, a lot of people
don't listen to the news.
A lot of people just believe it. But so the bottom line is they are hurting the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris probably wouldn't even be the nominee if she had been vetted. And Biden might not be the president if he was vetted because they have better candidates, much better candidates. They have better ideas than supporting
So did the Republicans.
Kim, stop interrupting me. They have crime, they have crazy, deranged ideas on crime, immigration, men into women's sports. Most people do not agree with them on this and open borders. But this is where they're going. And you know what? The bottom line, my final point, besides saying Kim, as Kim always says, get healthy, get wealthy, is that it's the media which is driving ratings. It is great for them. They create division and interest. I've got to watch the show. The world is going to collapse if Trump gets into office because he's going to be a dictator. I got to watch this. And they're causing panic among the American public on both sides. And Fox isn't, totally devoid of some of this, but I'm in the half that says, which half I'm in. Anyway, we are more than out of time at 33 minutes. Thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. It's always interesting, that's for sure. And we will see you in 2 weeks and see who the president of the United States is and who our Congress is. And then we'll go through there. As a footnote, I will criticize either ones, but hopefully it'll be minor criticism.
Stay healthy, stay wealthy. Happy Halloween.
Thanks, Kim. See you soon.